Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As we're settling in here, getting things going, week one just around the corner. I'm your host, Davis Ellington, and we're going to get it started today. We're going to, with football just getting going here, Thursday night, Bears, Packers, we're going to take a look around the league at what's been going on recently, some big stories breaking today, and of course we're going to start with that main dish. Ezekiel Elliott's holdout has ended. The Cowboys have their superstar running back on the squad. He has been signed to a record deal by the Cowboys. His contract not up just yet. He still has 2 years left on his rookie deal, so he's going to pull in $103 million after he signed for a $90 million extension over 6 years. So Zeke getting that money secured from Jerry Jones, and the Cowboys are getting ready to go into the season now with their lead back, and it really, Ezekiel Elliott with this deal is changing the football landscape. As we saw a couple years ago, running backs were dropping lower and lower, and then we saw it in the draft. You could get really good running backs like David Johnson for the Cardinals, a third-round pick in Bruce Arians' squad back when he was drafted. Ezekiel Elliott, however, out of Ohio State, had so much buzz around him coming out of college football. He almost single-handedly was able to pull that Ohio State offense to the national championship. Him, the crop-top jersey and all, making those waves, and now he's done it again here in the NFL. He's shown the value of the running back, and we've seen it now with some of the newer athletes in the league. The running back, once again, has become the position where you put your best athlete there. We saw it with Montgomery in Green Bay when they needed a running back behind Aaron Rodgers. They converted him from a wide receiver. Todd Gurley, of course, for the Rams, one of the best athletes we've seen in a while. Alvin Kamara for the Saints. Christian McCaffrey's been fantastic out of Stanford in his first couple of seasons for the Panthers. He's been a do-it-all kind of guy, and he's really been able to make that offense for Carolina just so much more lethal with his pass-catching ability and his evasive maneuvering out of the backfield and in the open space. And then, of course, you can't overlook Saquon Barkley, who had even Eli Manning staring at those amazing thighs of his during training camp. The dude is an animal. And Saquon is like Ezekiel Elliott 2.0. He's that culmination of these athletes we're seeing at the running back position, bringing that value back. So many pundits were saying it's a passer's league now. It's all about the aerial offense, and people are going out and getting bombers for quarterbacks and trying to take yardage. Mike Wallace, receiver for the Steelers and as well for the Ravens, was one of those receivers that had so much speed. It looked like the league was just heading in that way, and then here we are, Ezekiel Elliott, showing that the running back position is all but dead. He was drafted in the first round, and ever since he was picked at that number 5 spot when the Cowboys went up and got him, we've seen guys like Saquon and other running backs, McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, not to be forgotten about, who is an absolute stud coming out of LSU, and he's looking to have a huge bounce-back season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. All these guys have been drafted high in the first rounds. People are going up there getting their running backs because they now once again realize how important that position is. We have another big running back in the NFL drafted this season, Josh Jacobs out of Alabama for the Raiders. Going to be interesting to see what happens with him. A lot of hype surrounding him coming out of that Nick Saban offense. And it'll be really interesting to see across the NFL what Ezekiel Elliott's deal means. We've seen it with quarterbacks, Derek Carr, Matt Ryan, so many. Jared Goff just got re-signed, Andrew Luck when he was signed. They keep continuously breaking the mold. It almost seems like every free agent season you see guys like Kirk Cousins get new record-breaking deals, and the quarterback position, that record is just shattered every single season. Sometimes multiple times you'll have guys just waiting for the next person to sign. But in the running back market, it's been kind of stale. It had been trending down. And now all of a sudden, teams have to reallocate their funds for that big-time running back. And Jerry Jones talked about it. He had Tony Pollard, a great rookie coming out. He showed real promise in preseason. But the fact that they went and signed Zeke right now shows how valuable that position is once again. They're not going to risk it on the rookie as well as he did. He's just not Ezekiel Elliott. And guys are seeing that around the league, that really powerful Tier 1 running back is back in the NFL. The guy that you can just give the ball to 25 times a game and lean on has returned. The LaDainian Tomlinson-like offenses where you center everything around that one big-time playmaker are going to be in effect, and defenses are going to have to prepare for it. The big thing these last couple seasons were the tight ends, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, those big guys that can move in space and that were nightmares for coverage. Coaches and GMs were having to draft with that in mind. Guys were being picked. They were linebackers, almost turned into safeties because their sole job was to watch that tight end. Now we're going to see that with the running backs, and especially with the passing offenses. We see it in Carolina. You watch their game, you're going to see a lot of Christian McCaffrey. He might not carry the ball 20 times a game, but he's going to touch it 20 times a game in that passing offense. He's going to have 11 receptions in a lot of games, and he's going to hit that double-digit mark because they want to get him the ball in space, get him away from those big linemen, and let him work out against cornerbacks, against linebackers who are out of position. These are things that defensive coordinators once again have to plan for. You can't sit back, you can't drop 6 in coverage, go after your quarterback, and then just dare them to beat you in that passing game and go out and get your big super stud corners like your Darrelle Revises, your Patrick Petersons. Now you got to come up, you got to get on the line, and you got to be aware of these guys. And even the running backs are making adjustments themselves. Leonard Fournette has worked a lot on his pass catching ability because Ezekiel Elliott, along with Alvin Kamara, McCaffrey against Saquon, have made the pass-catching running back such a weapon. He's out working on his hands. You even see Frank Gore, the veteran-type running backs are out there working on becoming better space players, better pass catchers, better route runners. These are the things that the position is having to adopt now because Ezekiel Elliott, as well as his compatriots, have recreated really the position of running back, and we've seen that in the big deal that he has just accumulated. And then on the flip side of the coin here in the running back era, you have Melvin Gordon with his holdout still continuing. And this is something that it was like Ezekiel Elliott. It's not quite Le'Veon Bell-esque because he has to play at some point by week 10, or else this season does not count toward his free agency, and he'll just be on the Chargers for another year, but they've allowed him to pursue offers. But he's the type of guy that teams now might really go after. You have a proven running back. He can play in space. He can also play on third down, first, second down. Doesn't matter. You can get him on the goal line, give him carries. He's a workhorse type of player. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now with a guy like him potentially on the market. Do teams go away from that and go spend the extra cash or trade the extra assets in order to get a player that at one time was playing a position that people could kind of just overlook? You could say, oh, we could fill that with another athlete. We have a rookie running back like a Tony Pollard or a Darrell Henderson. We're just going to roll that guy out there, fill the space, and let our superstars at the quarterback, the wide receiver, the tight end positions really carry this offense. This is something that is going to be interesting to watch, especially with week 1, like we said, just coming up here. Thursday Night Football is going to get things kicked off, and we have a full slate of games afterward. Where does Melvin Gordon end up? You know the Chargers want to have him. Austin Eckler, as good as he is not Melvin Gordon. But at the same time, the Chargers are well aware that they are building a very stout defense. Rivers is getting older. They're going to need to make a quarterback move in the near future. And, of course, with Keenan Allen, his injury history, you just never quite know. So they don't want to allocate those funds to a Melvin Gordon guy. But because of Ezekiel Elliott, Gordon now knows that he is far more valuable than what the deal that the Chargers have been getting. So we're going to have to watch that and see exactly where Gordon ends on this spectrum. Ezekiel Elliott's deal blew away Todd Gurley. It has set a new benchmark for the running back position financially, and owners, general managers, coaches, and players are all going to have to adjust to this new era of football where the running back is a real and true dual threat position that can change offenses. It's not the Wildcat like everyone thought with Miami running that. It's going to be this passing catch, dink and dunk, heavy screen offenses where you get your athletes, your playmakers out in space. So as the season gets going, we're going to see what happens. Granted, Zeke was out. He was in Cabo doing his workouts and everything. Is that going to help him? Is he ready to go? These are things that can only be answered by watching the game. So come week 1, we got Dallas Cowboy football, and Zeke is going to be in the limelight when the whistle blows. So stay tuned for more coverage as we will return here on the GSMC Podcast Network.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Settling back in here after our commercial break. I'm Davis Ellington. As we're going to get going, we talked about Ezekiel Elliott and the running back landscape and how it's been changing. Now we're going to turn to some quarterback turnover around the league in preparation for week 1. What we're going to see, what we're not going to see is what we're going to start with, however, as we have, of course, the huge news coming out, I believe it was last week, Andrew Luck retiring, much to the shock of everyone around the football world. His career is done. He is elected to walk away now. He has cited health reasons for the main reason that he is leaving, as well as wanting to spend time with his family and pursue other interests. And now that news has, I'm sure, settled with a lot of the listeners here. It's settled with the Colts and Luck as in himself. And now we have to turn to what is the Indianapolis Colts outlook now without Andrew Luck in the picture. To refresh your memory, they let Peyton Manning walk away. They basically kind of threw a season away. They had Curtis Painter as their quarterback. They didn't exactly play their best lineups all the time, and that led to the number 1 overall pick that they spent on Mr. Luck, as he was supposed to be the next John Elway and supposed to lead the Colts into this new era. And much like John Elway, he has walked away from the Colts and not given them everything of himself from his career. He did give them some amazing moments, though, and everyone does things for their own reasons, and Luck, though now gone, Colts have to turn back to business. They have Jacoby Brissett as their starting quarterback scheduled week 1. He's going to go out there. We've seen him plenty of times before now already. I'm sure if anyone's a T.Y. Hilton fantasy football owner, you were more than aware when Jacoby Brissett was in the game, as T.Y.'s numbers were not the best as they were with Luck. And so now with Brissett as the full-time quarterback, what do you do if you're the Colts, especially in the general manager's suite? You got to get a quarterback. Jacoby Brissett, as good as he is, he's not leading you to the AFC Championship game, and he's not going to try to duel Mahomes or Brady. So you got to look to the draft now. Do you do another kind of throwaway season? But you have so much talent on the other side of that. If you throw this season away, you try to get into the top pick, you make some moves, and you get your quarterback in the draft. That's another guy's career you have to build and get ready to be able to shoulder the burden that is leading an NFL franchise. Now, on the flip side of the coin, like we just said, you have so much talent. Marlon Mack emerged last season as a fantastic running back, especially down the stretch of the season. He was phenomenal. You still have T.Y. Hilton, who, when he's getting passes in his vicinity, he's one of the best receivers in the National Football League and one of the best vertical threats as well. A great route runner, all-around player. You also, on the defensive side of the ball, used one of your picks last year to draft the all-pro Darius Leonard at middle linebacker, arguably the most important position on the defensive side of the ball. The Colts defense has been trending upward. Their offense has been trending upward. The offensive line is shaky at times, but has been doing okay. So what do? Do you try to trade for a quarterback? We saw some quarterbacks move around this offseason. Josh Rosen left after Kyler Murray was drafted. He's now with the Dolphins. But now, if you're the Colts, you got to think who is in the market to move a quarterback right now, and that's a tough call. You're going into week 1. Everyone's pretty much got their rosters set, so this season's not going to be what the Colts had imagined. However, you can build on this production that you had at all your other positions. I would recommend, if the Raiders have a bad season, Derek Carr most likely is going to be on the chopping block. He's had a lot of chances. He was phenomenal in 2016 before he broke his leg against the Indianapolis Colts. That cost him a potential MVP trophy, and his Raiders were poised to make a deep run in the playoffs. They were being cited as the only team to challenge the Patriots in that season. Come playoff time, that was all thrown away when Carr got hurt. He really hasn't looked the same, but maybe a change of scenery would be good for him. He can be plug and played right into that Colts offense. There are a couple other quarterbacks around the league you could imagine getting moved. Joe Flacco's already moved over to the Broncos. You could see him move again, because if you're the Colts, you really just need a loaner. You need that rental veteran that you can throw in for a year or two. He'll get you where you need to go, and he'll just tread water until you're able to get those bigger guns in. So the Colts are in an interesting spot to watch as this season goes on. But to move on to another quarterback that has really not been under the microscope as much as I think the league was expecting when the move was made, is Nick Foles is going to lead the Jacksonville Jaguars this season under center, replacing Blake Bortles as the Bortles experiment finally comes to a close. And Jacksonville, mind you, has one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have a fantastic front seven and good secondary as well. They were almost impossible to score on a couple years ago when they made it all the way to the AFC title game and fell to the Patriots just by a hair. Blake Bortles was almost able to get that team to the promised land. But after that, a tough season last year. Leonard Fournette really underperforming. He was playing hurt a lot. And really just not a great season for the big LSU running back. The wide receiver corps with D.D. Westbrook really just didn't live up. You had Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns. Those guys really were not what you were expecting. Allen Robinson with that torn ACL a couple seasons ago as well. Allen Hurns and Robinson have both since moved on from Jacksonville. But now, with Nick Foles in there and the heroics we all know far too well in Philadelphia on his resume, he's being looked at as a guy that could lead this team to a Super Bowl. The question is that possible, or is that an inflated idea for a guy like Nick Foles? Remind you, he was a starter for the Eagles before. He has started football games in the regular season. He's done very well. He lit the Oakland Raiders up a couple seasons ago for the Eagles when he threw for 7 touchdowns and set NFL records on that Sunday in Oakland. However, he has not been a long-term starting quarterback in the NFL. He was amazing when he got the Eagles to the Super Bowl and beat the Patriots, and he almost did it again last season as well. Foles has been tremendous in the postseason, but in the 16-week grind of games, can Nick Foles produce on a consistent basis is something we have not seen yet from this guy. And granted, he's getting thrown into Jacksonville with a tremendous defense. He's going to get the ball a lot. He's got a great escape valve in the man standing behind him in Leonard Fournette. But can he make that wide receiver core work for him is the question. Can he maneuver in the pocket, get away from tacklers, not just on one game here, one game there, but on a consistent basis? That's the real question about Foles, is that consistency. We all know he has that superhuman clutch gene riddled in his DNA. No one is doubting that from Nick, and if he can get the Jaguars into that position, he's probably going to get the job done for you. But it's about getting into that position. It's about making the playoffs as the Jaguars, as a full team. And Nick Foles, being the quarterback of this team, is the guy they're going to really need to look to win them some games. And come week 12, week 13, when you're banged up, you're bruised, can he lead his squad to do that? In the postseason, he was dropped in fresh as a daisy to take on those teams. And even though it is NFL postseason, everyone's playing through injuries. You got Nick Foles out there. He was ready to go, and he did exactly that. He lit the league up for about a month and a half. Can he do that on a long-term basis? My first judgment's probably not. He's not a guy that has proven that. He's only gotten older. There's no reason to firmly believe he's going to do it. I'm not hopeful that Foles is going to have the season everyone's looking for from him in Jacksonville. But if he can make the playoffs, just squeak in, do a Peyton Manning, and use that defense to force your way into the playoffs, then I have no one I would want on my team, most likely under center, to lead a fourth quarter drive than Nick Foles from what he's done in his recent play. And it's such a weird concept to think about this guy, that you want him in the postseason, but in the regular season, he just really hasn't done it. Normally, it's the other way around. You think about quarterbacks like Dan Marino, Hall of Famer, in no way is he comparable to Nick Foles, but he was a guy that was so good for so long, but just other than that one season getting to the Super Bowl, just could never do it again. Foles is on the opposite side of the coin. He's been in these weird scenarios when he's been able to drop in and become a hero and literally save a city from the New England Patriots. So that's something that is really going to be interesting to watch in Jacksonville, is Nick Foles taking the mantle, trying to turn that team around as they've moved on from Blake Bortles. So some quarterback shakeups for sure here in the league. Those are just two of the most prominent ones. Of course, Andrew Luck leaving caught everyone by surprise. And Nick Foles, with so much happening with Antonio Brown, Ezekiel Elliott, Andrew Luck, and other players making moves, leaving the game, having disgruntled arguments with their owners over salaries. Melvin Gordon, of course, we talked about earlier. Nick Foles has kind of flown under the radar. But now, come week one, the lights are going to be on him, and he is going to be subject to the scrutiny of the NFL. And if he can perform, that would be amazing. What a story for the guy. But he still has to do it in Jacksonville. It's going to be really fun to watch come week one when he suits up. He's got Fournette behind him. It's all set for Jacksonville to really make a run. But it's all down to whether or not Foles can be the Nick Foles of the postseason for an entire season. So we're going to go into a short break, but we'll come right back. You're listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Davis Ellington here with you, jumping right back in. We've discussed some interesting topics going into week one of football, and now we have to address a couple more here. We're going to start in with exactly what is going on in Oakland with Antonio Brown. So many things have happened, it's hard to keep track of, and Hard Knocks being there did not help the situation for the Raiders in dealing with their star wide receiver and the various antics surrounding him. The helmet issue has been well documented for some time. For those who don't know, Antonio Brown's helmet that he has used his entire career was deemed illegal by the NFL. It wasn't safe enough for Antonio, so he decided to file a suit saying that he wasn't given enough time to adequately find a helmet he liked to wear for the games. He filed 2 different grievances. Both did not fly with the NFL, and he lost both of them, so he has had to find a helmet. He has reported to camp. The newest thing being he has been fined by Mike Mayock, his general manager, for missing so much time with the team. Antonio Brown has stated how upset he is about these fines being levied on him. But frankly, I love Antonio Brown's charisma. I love the way he uses the media to help him. And you got to think about the Raiders with Hard Knocks, with everything around their team right now, media-wise. There's a lot of scrutiny. John Gruden being signed to that 10-year, $100 million contract, trading Khalil Mack, trading Amari Cooper. Everyone in the NFL media is trying to keep tabs on what's going on in Oakland, and Antonio Brown, by taking so much of that media heat, he has really made it easier for guys like PJ Hall, Arden Key, Cleveland Ferrell, Jonathan Abrams, Josh Jacobs. All these rookies and second-year players that really have some potential have not had to deal with this media blitz because Antonio has been there to kind of shield them from that. And on that side, I think that the Raiders, as an organization, as a fan base, need to thank Antonio Brown for taking that heat off of their other players so that they can develop and really dig into the system, not having to worry about media relations. However, now with this new grievance, hopefully it's nothing between Antonio Brown and Mike Mayock. They can just move past it. It's obvious that he had to get fined for missing so much time with the team. That's really just a save-your-face move by Mayock. Hopefully Brown and his agent realize this, and they can move on, get ready for Week 1. The Raiders on Monday Night Football against the Broncos. It's going to be a big test in Oakland. Antonio needs to be ready, and if this stuff's in his head, if this is clouding his ability to play at his top performance, that's really going to show out on the field. He and Carr haven't had a lot of time to work all of these things, including the foot, you can say, injury that happened to Antonio Brown. For those who don't know, he had some freezing done on his foot for cryogenics and out in France. And what happened was he got frostbite on his feet. And, of course, that's not Antonio's fault. It's the fault of the person who is doing it on him, and they didn't check that he had the proper footwear. But again, another thing that kept Antonio away, and that might be one of the reasons he's upset, is that he had this frostbite and he didn't feel like he could practice to his fullest extent. But that's the newest things going on with Antonio Brown, and something to definitely watch as the season goes on. The Raiders have really invested in Antonio Brown being a cornerstone. They traded for him. They didn't give up a lot to get him by any means when you look at Odell Beckham's trade and things like that. But it's because of these antics that Antonio Brown brings with him that the Steelers just wanted to clean house. They wanted to get rid of him, focus in on making Juju Smith-Schuster their new number one. So now it's the Raiders' deal to try to hang on to Antonio and get him going in the right direction, because when he is focused on football, he's the best wide receiver in the league, maybe outside of Julio Jones. But that is going to be something definitely to watch with Antonio. Do these problems continue as the season goes on? You just never know with Antonio Brown. You wake up each morning, it's something new that's happened with him, but that's something to definitely watch here in the NFL season as it gets underway. And we really haven't heard a lot about any other players' helmet issues or anything like that. Brady's made a statement saying that he wasn't happy about it and that making the change was a little difficult, but he was able to do it. A lot of other players have commented as well. Antonio Brown has been that one guy that's really made his voice heard on the issue. And we've been seeing so much of this around the NFL lately with players really upset, especially when we've seen the contract holdouts. And we talked about it earlier with the running backs, Ezekiel Elliott as well as Melvin Gordon holding out. Zeke got his deal done. However, Melvin Gordon still has not returned to the Chargers. He and his camp have been allowed to seek a trade. It'll be interesting to see what comes of that. But the NFL clearly is developing a problem right now with players not playing out their contracts, waiting on new deals to be done. And that's something that the NFL Players Association, the owners, and the commissioner and Roger Goodell need to get together and figure out a way to keep players on the field, because as a fan, you don't want to see your guys held out of games because of contract disputes. You want to see them out on the field playing for your teams. That's why we're here. That's why we're watching it. Of course, they need to get paid. So both sides need to figure out a way to structure contracts so that deals have a real window to get done and players don't hold out themselves out of games, and we don't ever have another Le'Veon Bell situation on our hands where one of the best players in the game is gone for a whole year, not from injury, but simply just because he didn't feel like he was getting paid what he was worth. And that's something that teams are going to need to figure out. It's going to be a real kind of change of culture as we kind of progress here in the next 3 to probably 5 years of the NFL, trying to figure out how we can avoid these contractual holdouts. Because you got to remember, Ezekiel Elliott had 2 more years on his contract. Melvin Gordon still is signed to this season, but he's refusing to play because he hasn't been offered a new contract just yet. So the way I see it, you got to figure out a way to really stagger the ability of when these guys can hold off playing for a new contract and when deals can get done. There needs to be a better window for both sides to feel security, because that's all these players want, especially at the running back position. There's so much injury history at that spot. Careers are so much shorter. They want to make sure they get paid for their work, and rightfully so. They absolutely should. But you also want them to be playing if you're on the flip side of that coin. So both sides here need to get it together and figure out a way to keep players going. And it's these little problems we've seen with Antonio Brown. He's already back ready to go. But any other contractual holdouts like Le'Veon Bell and potentially like Melvin Gordon could really hurt this league when you don't have your best players playing because of contractual issues, even though they've been signed through that season. So in the next couple of seasons, really watch for the Players Association to try to figure out a way to get something done with the owners around this topic, because it's been a real plague to the NFL. Their ratings have hurt a little bit from it. You just don't, when you don't have your premier guys on your Sunday night and Monday night football, fans are going to be upset. And it's going to be interesting to see how both sides are able to figure this out, because it's something that needs to be dealt with in the NFL. And that is going to be it for us today on our on our football podcast. Tune in Friday for more football here on the GSMC Podcast Network.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.